Shell Point. I'm Jeff Corey from the Legacy Foundation. Today we're going to talk a little bit about estate planning. And we have Craig Hirsch from the Shepherd Law Firm with us today. Craig, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Jeff.
Now, for those of you who don't know Craig, you've been an author here for the Island Sun, have articles. I know a lot of our Sanibel residents have seen you through the years. How many years have you been doing that?
18 years now. I've been writing articles for the Island Sun, their estate planning column called Willpower.
Great. And you've been an estate planning attorney and practicing here in Fort Myers for how long?
I've been an estate planning attorney now for 29 years, and in my firm, the Shepherd Law Firm, for 26 years. So,
awesome.
So yeah, and soon to be the senior partner. I was the young buck.
Exactly. I think we both, 25 years ago when I met you,
yeah.
we were both young kids. So not sure what happened. But anyways, we're going to talk a little bit about estate planning. And I have some questions for you. We're just going to do a little potpourri of five estate planning mistakes to avoid.
Okay.
Okay, so my first question for you is, or a mistake not to avoid is not having a comprehensive estate plan.
Yeah. Well, obviously, we want to make sure that we have a will at least, or a revocable trust. You'll probably ask me about that in just a minute or two. Power of attorney is very, very important. If we become disabled, a lot of people think of power of attorney as something that you use at death, but that's your will or your trust. The power of attorney, of course, is if they need the Legacy Foundation, for example, to write your bills, and if you can't do it for yourself, write your checks, pay your bills. Mm-hmm. Healthcare surrogate, of course, is a part of a comprehensive estate plan. We want to make sure that someone's designated to make healthcare decisions for you in case you can't do so for yourself. And then the living will is a very important document. That's our right to die document, the document that allows us to designate if we want life support removed.
Okay, so if you're looking to update your estate plan, you as the estate planning attorney would like to see all the documents, everything prepared at once, make sure they all coordinate, that sort of thing.
Particularly for the residents that come from out of state, or they haven't updated even their Florida plan in a while, good idea to take a look at it.
Okay, so that was my next question for you. Nice lead in there.
Okay.
Something to avoid, not updating your will. I know I've met with some residents that they say, hey, I haven't looked at my will in 20, 25 years. I assume that's something that you should look at regularly.
Yeah, you know, one of the questions when I'm reading a resident's will, for example, and it says, well, I name as guardian over my children such and such, and you know, I say, well, are your children still minors? No, my son's 55 years old. Right. You know? I think that's a little bit out of date. It's time to take a look at the will. Yeah.
Okay. What about out-of-state documents?
Well, you know, every state has different laws, and that includes Florida. So it's a good idea to make sure that your documents are up to date with the state in which you reside. Now, Florida's a great state to reside. We have no income tax, no estate tax, no state level income tax.
Right.
So, yeah, if you're a Florida resident now, good idea to update your documents to Florida law.
Okay. Next question, choosing the wrong executor or trustee, something you want to avoid. How do you decide who to choose to make those important decisions for you to carry out your wishes? Well,
I wrote a book on that, Selecting Your Trustee. And if anyone wants a book, just contact my law office, 334-1141, 239-334-1141, and we'll be happy to get them a copy of that book. But so that's the subject of a whole book. But we want to make sure, generally speaking, that the party that you're naming has the time to do it, is responsible, is responsive. There's a whole list of attributes that we want somebody to have.
Okay, so just because they're not, they're the oldest child, that doesn't mean necessarily that they're the best person to serve in your estate plan.
You know, I've had a conversation with so many clients, and they'll say, well, I'm going to name my son Adam as the trustee, and I'll say, tell me about Adam. Well, Adam's been through 4 bankruptcies, and he's had some drug problems, and obviously you don't want to name Adam. And I'll say, why do you want to name Adam? I say, well, he's the oldest. He'll be offended if I don't name him. So read my book, and that helps. Now your office serves as trustee.
We sure do.
Yeah. And that's not a bad idea to put the onus on somebody who's a professional. You can always name a family member as a co-trustee.
Right.
But that way, at least you're not putting all the burdens on one person.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 4, one of the things we want to avoid is not planning for incapacity or end-of-life issues.
Right, and we touched upon that with the power of attorney, with the healthcare surrogate and the living will. Those are difficult issues to even think about.
Right.
Who wants to think about their incapacity? Who wants to think about if your lying in a hospital bed in a coma, irreversible coma. Those. But nevertheless, you don't want to be like Terry Schiavo. We all remember the Terry Schiavo case from about 15 years ago. She was up in the Clearwater, Dunedin area. She did not have a living will. She was on life support for several years, more than a decade, before the court system finally allowed her to be removed from that life support. So we want to think about those issues.
Okay. One of the things I often hear from residents is, when is the healthcare surrogate actually appointed? Or when is the living will actually used? When does that come into play?
Those are good questions. The healthcare surrogate, you actually have a choice on our documents that we prepare in our office, and it's based on the Florida statute. You can make the healthcare surrogate effective immediately, which we suggest. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're ceding the ability for yourself to make decisions for yourself. But it's a good idea to have somebody right there for you, backed up, if it's your spouse, if it's one of your children, if it's another loved one, a friend. The living will, on the other hand, only applies when you've met the precondition under the statute, which is essentially you're at end-stage terminal condition, there's no hope of your recovery, 2 physicians have certified, your healthcare surrogate has also agreed, and there's no way for you to come back to a normal existence, and that's the threshold for a living will to apply.
Okay, that's great information. And the last mistake we want to avoid, right up your alley, not meeting with an estate planning attorney. Now, I do get the occasional resident who said, I Googled wills and trusts, and I now have something here, and I want you to, I'm going to sign it and notarize it. What's wrong with taking your documents off of Google or some free service you find on the internet?
This sounds self-serving, but I'll say this. Now, for almost anybody who's wealthy enough to reside here at Shell Point, an internet-based document prep is probably not enough for you. There's so many pitfalls that can be avoided if you simply meet with a qualified estate planning attorney. I'll tell you what, do you remember those old Fram oil filter commercials?
Oh, sure.
Pay me now or pay me later. Do you remember those?
Right.
Either the idea was change oil now or get a whole engine job later. And the same sort of thing applies to estate planning. You can go cheap early, but it might cost your spouse or it might cost your loved one significant amounts if even one of the smallest mistakes appears.
Right. Yeah, and we've seen that through the years in working with you, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, well, Craig, thank you for being here and helping us to avoid some common estate planning mistakes.
Thanks, Jeff, for having me.